Stop. Stephen, not needed, but thank you, I appreciate it.
What are you talking about? This isn't for you. What? Get out of the way, he's coming!
What was supposed to be just another lighthearted late-night interview turned into one of Prince Harry's most uncomfortable public appearances to date. It started with warm smiles, polite applause, and Colbert's signature charm. But by the time the interview ended, it had morphed into a full-blown confrontation, complete with walkouts, accusations, and an emotionally raw royal caught entirely off guard. This wasn't just a bad interview, it was a moment of real-time unraveling that no media team could have scripted. And before we go any further, make sure to hit that subscribe button now. This is the kind of inside story the mainstream won't tell you, and we've got the full breakdown coming your way. It all began like any other episode of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with the usual excitement. The lights were adjusted, cameras locked in, and the audience casually chatted as they waited for the show to begin. Behind the scenes, Colbert prepared like he always does. Notes in hand, glasses perched, adjusting his suit with the ease of a man who's done this 1,000 times. Meanwhile, Prince Harry sat in the green room, calm, composed, dressed to perfection. Security by his side, he looked like a man in control, polished and prepared. This wasn't his first time on American television, but there was something heavier in the air. Maybe it was the spotlight he's carried since childhood. Maybe it was the subject matter they all knew was going to come up. But make no mistake, there was tension hiding behind those smiles. The show began. Colbert delivered his monologue full of topical jokes and political zingers, and the crowd laughed on cue. All signs pointed to a smooth ride. Then came the moment of truth. Colbert introduced Prince Harry, and the crowd erupted in applause. There were cheers, standing ovations, genuine excitement. Harry walked onto the stage, smiled politely, waved, and took his seat. The tone was friendly, familiar. It was exactly what everyone expected. The first few minutes followed the script. Light conversation, jokes about California weather, casual references to Harry's charity work, even a few anecdotes about life with Meghan and the kids. He talked about mental health, fatherhood, the cultural differences between the UK and the US. It was clear, this was Harry in PR mode. Polished, controlled, everything on message, but there was something else, something subtle, a slight delay in his smile, a bit more pause before each answer. His posture shifted ever so slightly when the questions got even a little close to personal. You had to be watching carefully, but the clues were there. Colbert, known for his humor but respected for his sharpness, wasn't just making small talk, he was laying the groundwork. He has a method. Disarm the guest with warmth and then slide into deeper waters. And that's exactly what he did. The first shift came when Colbert asked about the monarchy, not just the role Harry once played, but whether the institution itself still has relevance in a changing world. It wasn't framed aggressively, but it was pointed. And Harry, trained for this, handled it diplomatically. He spoke about tradition, about change, about public conversations that need to happen. But then came the pivot. Colbert brought up the finances, the real cost of walking away from royal duties. The deals, the book, the Netflix specials, the security arrangements, things the public has speculated about, but Harry rarely discusses in detail. That's when the room changed. Harry laughed, made a light joke about American fascination with money, but his eyes said something different. He shifted in his seat, smiled less, and for the first time, gave answers that felt a little more guarded than composed. Colbert didn't stop there. He asked about the so-called privacy paradox, how Harry and Meghan demand privacy yet appear in high-profile media, release memoirs, and dominate headlines. How do you reconcile that? Colbert asked, gently but directly. Harry tried. He explained that privacy doesn't mean disappearing, it means choosing how and when to engage, that it's about controlling the narrative, not silencing it. But the words felt rehearsed. Too clean, too careful, and more importantly, they didn't satisfy the moment. There was a pause in the room, a long, awkward silence that wasn't filled by audience chuckles or applause, just stillness. Everyone watching felt it. This interview was no longer a media-friendly exchange. It was a live-wire conversation bouncing on the edge of something raw and unscripted. Harry's next answers became more vague, more thematic than direct. And Colbert, like a veteran, leaned into that discomfort. He pushed a little harder, asked what specific pressures Harry was referring to when he talked about the institution. What did that actually mean? Who applied those pressures? How did they shape his decisions? And that was the moment the unraveling began. Prince Harry didn't lash out immediately. That's not his style. But there was a sudden change in tone, a flicker of frustration in his voice, a subtle shift in how he looked at Colbert. He answered the question, but the polish had worn off. The tone was no longer measured, it was defensive. "I think you're oversimplifying something deeply personal," Harry said, his words crisp but edged with heat. Colbert, ever the professional, didn't react. He sat back, listened, and then calmly asked for clarification. "If this is more complex than people think, help us understand. What exactly are we missing?" That was the moment Harry stopped playing along. He leaned forward and questioned Colbert's intentions. "Are you genuinely interested in hearing my perspective, or are you just after sound bites that'll drive headlines?" The room went completely still, not even a nervous chuckle. No applause, just silence. Colbert didn't flinch. His expression changed slightly. Surprise, maybe, but he stayed composed. "Prince Harry," he replied, "everything I've asked is based on things you've already said. Your book, your interviews, your documentary. No one forced you to come here." It wasn't an attack, it was a line in the sand, and Harry stepped over it. His voice, no longer calm, accused the host of turning the show into a trap, of using public curiosity as a weapon against him. He said the media was doing the same thing it always did, simplifying, sensationalizing, and ignoring the emotional complexity behind every decision he's made. Colbert, unfazed, responded firmly. "This show doesn't manufacture narratives, we ask questions. And when public figures speak out as often and as publicly as you have to expect people will ask for details." For a split second, it looked like Harry might recover. He took a breath. He adjusted his posture, but the pressure had built up too long. Instead of returning to diplomacy, he doubled down. He accused the show, and by extension, the American media, of packaging trauma into entertainment. He said the blending of journalism and comedy reduced real pain into punchlines. "You say you want to inform people," he said, "but you also want a viral clip, and that contradiction is part of the problem." The irony was almost too perfect. He was saying this while appearing on a program known for turning interviews into shareable content. He was attacking the very format he'd agreed to participate in. Colbert didn't escalate. Instead, he clarified the show's mission: inform, entertain, and push public discourse forward. But he also made something else clear. "You chose to sit in this chair." That's when everything truly fell apart. Harry stood up. It wasn't a polite adjustment or a pause to gather himself. He physically rose from his chair and pointed at Colbert. His voice was louder now, urgent, accusing. "This is exactly the kind of ambush I walked away from. This is what I left behind." His security team, sensing the moment had turned volatile, began to move. The stage lights hadn't dimmed, the cameras were still rolling, and the audience, stunned, sat frozen, unsure whether this was real or a performance. But there was no doubt. This was raw. Colbert stayed seated. He didn't try to stop him. He didn't argue. He simply looked up at Harry and said, "If this can't continue respectfully, perhaps it shouldn't continue at all." Harry didn't sit down. He accused the host of trying to silence him. He claimed this moment was symbolic of everything wrong with institutional power, that even outside the royal family, people like Colbert use control to shape the narrative, not reveal truth. And then, as his voice cracked ever so slightly, he turned to leave. His security escorted him off stage. He didn't speak to the audience. He didn't say goodbye. It wasn't a walkout. It was an emotional storm leaving the room. Back on stage, Colbert remained alone. The cameras stayed wide. The band was silent. There was no applause sign. Just the image of a host watching a prince walk away, not just from an interview, but from control. As the cameras cut to commercial, the studio was left in silence. Not the usual quick switch to upbeat music or the clapping that follows even the most awkward moments. Just silence. Colbert remained seated, staring into the middle distance. For a few beats before the lights dimmed, behind the scenes, producers scrambled. No one had expected this. An interview with a royal, sure, but not a collapse of royal composure in front of a live audience. This wasn't just a misstep, it was a rupture, the kind you can't edit out or spin with a press release. When the show returned from break, Colbert was alone at the desk. His face showed no signs of anger, only gravity. He looked into the camera and, in a calm, firm voice, said, "Sometimes, conversations don't go the way you expect. That's live television, that's life." And with that, he pivoted to the next segment. But the energy had changed completely. Audience members clapped on cue, but the smiles were gone. Everyone knew they'd just witnessed something raw, real, and entirely unscripted. The kind of moment that redefines public personas in a single heartbeat. And then, the internet exploded within hours. Clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Hashtags like non-Perry meltdown, non-Colbert confrontation, and my royal walkout trended globally. Every major outlet picked it up, some with headlines praising Colbert's journalistic poise, others defending Harry's emotional honesty. Some called it the most revealing moment of Prince Harry's post-royal life. Others weren't so generous. They labeled it a PR disaster, a sign that Harry couldn't handle criticism without losing control. That maybe, just maybe, he had spent too long crafting his story without ever answering the tough questions. Commentators split into camps. One side saw Harry as a man cornered, finally breaking under the weight of years of public trauma. The other saw a privileged figure unraveling the second things didn't go according to plan. The contrast was stark. Some saw vulnerability, others saw volatility. But no one was indifferent. For Harry, this interview did something no documentary or memoir ever could. It pulled back the curtain on how tightly his image is controlled, and what happens when he loses that control. For years, he's spoken about reclaiming his voice, about escaping an institution that told him how to speak, where to stand, and what to say. But now, in a space that gave him that freedom, he faltered. And it wasn't just what he said, it was how he reacted when challenged. For Colbert, the fallout was different. His reputation, already rooted in balancing comedy with sharp inquiry, grew stronger. He hadn't been aggressive. He hadn't ambushed anyone. He simply asked the questions people were already thinking, and when the answers didn't land, he let the silence speak volumes. Media analysts praised him, not for provoking drama, but for holding a high-profile guest accountable without crossing any lines. In an era where celebrity interviews are often softball fluff pieces, Colbert reminded audiences what honest conversation looks like, even when it's uncomfortable. And for the public, it was a wake-up call. People started questioning what else has been carefully managed in Harry's media appearances. If he couldn't tolerate a little heat from a comedian, what would happen in a real debate? If he truly wants to be seen as more than a royal escapee, as a thought leader, activist, public figure, doesn't that come with the responsibility of facing hard questions? Those questions flooded forums, comment sections, podcasts, and news segments. The narrative was no longer just Harry and Meghan versus the royal family. It was bigger than that now. It was about authenticity, accountability, and the cost of controlling the story too tightly. The Late Show segment, in its raw, chaotic end, had become more powerful than any promotional tour Harry had done before. Because this time, people weren't just watching him speak, they were watching him react. And reactions, more than rehearsed answers, revealed the truth. In the days following the broadcast, what happened on The Late Show didn't just dominate headlines, it became a cultural flashpoint. News networks replayed the walkout clip over and over. YouTube creators dissected every second of Harry's facial expressions. Podcasts hosted entire episodes around the question, what just happened to Prince Harry? It wasn't just a bad interview, it was a moment that threatened to unravel years of brand positioning. Since stepping back from royal duties, Harry had worked meticulously to control his narrative. Carefully curated media appearances, polished documentaries, memoirs edited with surgical precision. Every move, every message was designed to reclaim his identity, not just as a former prince, but as a voice for mental health, modern leadership, and self-liberation. But in that one moment, when the lights were bright and the questions real, the mask slipped. The public saw something different. Not the polished humanitarian or the misunderstood royal, but a man who lost control the moment. He was truly challenged, not yelled at, not insulted, just asked to explain himself clearly, directly, and without a script. And the reaction wasn't just limited to media analysts or keyboard warriors. Hollywood insiders began whispering about the risks of booking Harry for interviews. Media consultants raised concerns about whether he was prepared for long-form, unscripted conversations. PR firms began crafting new strategies, not for promotion, but for damage control. Even some of Harry's most loyal supporters found themselves quietly questioning what they'd witnessed. Was he genuinely overwhelmed by trauma, or simply uncomfortable with transparency? The idea that Harry might be more image than substance, more controlled message than genuine voice, was now circulating openly. And that's dangerous territory for someone who has built their entire post-royal identity on authenticity. To make matters worse, the social media storm showed no signs of slowing down. Memes of Harry walking off set circulated widely. Parodies appeared within 24 hours. Influencers and commentators, many of whom had previously remained neutral, began to weigh in, often not kindly. The phrase, "Harry pulled a Colbert," even, started trending, used to describe someone who walks away when faced with tough questions. That kind of viral language isn't just embarrassing, it sticks. Meanwhile, Colbert's team made the quiet but strategic decision to air the interview in full, unedited. No cuts, no spin, just the raw footage as it happened. It was a bold move, and a brilliant one. It stripped away any accusations of manipulation or agenda. What viewers saw was exactly what took place: a host asking reasonable questions, and a guest who lost his cool when he couldn't control the outcome. In an age where trust is everything, that decision gave Colbert the upper hand. But perhaps the most fascinating part of all was how quiet Harry remained afterward. No statement, no public response, no clarification from his team. The silence was deafening, and in the absence of clarity, speculation filled the void. Was he embarrassed? Was he advised to lay low? Or was he simply stunned by how badly things had gone? Whatever the reason, the silence only fueled the fire, and the most damaging narrative began to emerge. Maybe Harry isn't ready for the world he's trying to enter, because stepping away from royalty isn't just about walking into freedom. It's about stepping into a space where you're expected to answer for your choices, honestly, clearly, and without flinching. You can't talk about transparency and then shut down when things get uncomfortable. You can't champion truth while dodging accountability. And you certainly can't build an image of resilience, only to walk off the stage when the questions cut too close. It was a moment of contradiction, of exposure, of discomfort. And that's exactly why it mattered. Because what happened that night wasn't just about one interview, it was about the growing tension between celebrity and credibility, between public image and private frustration, between control and chaos. And in that moment, chaos won. So, what do you think? Was Prince Harry unfairly ambushed? Or did he simply reveal that he's not as prepared for public scrutiny as he thought? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy these kinds of deep dive breakdowns into the most unexpected moments in pop culture and media, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we've got more eye-opening stories coming your way. And trust us, you won't want to miss what's next.